Welcome to another edition of No Fluff, No Stuff. I am the indomitable, incomparable Reverend Horace.
The
Lindsay,
who?
The indomitable, incomparable Reverend Horace Lindsay Sheffield III.
About it.
Of course, right across from me, we have someone of equal value and significance, and that is, of course, Stephanie. I like to call her Bennett, but she likes to be Pride. She takes pride in pride.
I'm humbled. Humbled.
Next to her, if you come around the table, is Andre Ash. He's the black version of Leave It to Beaver. And right next to me is Myra
got jokes
Epps,
today.
who's actually Stephanie's sister, and we're glad to have you. We want to talk about this whole situation with Keon Henderson. If I can kind of set a few things from the very beginning. There's a Latin term called ordus, O-R-D-U-S, salutis, which means that things need to be done in divine order. So when you have the notion of order of worship, that's where it comes from in the Latin, in the early ecclesiology and liturgy. There was a notion that someone had to be responsible when we gather. So there's a bifurcation between private worship. When I'm in my house, I'm in my car, I'm in my bathroom.
Right.
And even if it's not me, it's others, that's a little bit different situation than we come together for corporate worship, which has further goals than just edification when I'm in a private setting. Yeah. Hence, Paul says to people, if you don't have an interpreter when you speak in tongues, don't do that in the body, right? Because the body is a place for everyone.
Yeah.
I just want to set that out there because some people have been really crazy in this Keon Henderson situation, suggesting that whatever a person wants to do in worship, they should be able to do it. And I don't agree with that.
I was about to say, you're a pastor, so if that happened to you on a Sunday morning, what would you have done?
Well, let me finish. I want to throw this out here because I think it's important to have some context.
Okay.
So I just want to suggest to you that it's not true that anyone should be able to do whatever they want to do in a corporate setting where the goal is for all people to experience the presence of God and to be edified, right? And that as an individual, I may have to sacrifice my moment to make certain that everyone has theirs as well, right? Second important context, the Bible even prophets are subject unto the prophet. Right. So somebody has to be the worship leader. Now, sometimes that's not necessarily the pastor, but in the modern context in which we find worship now, where Keon runs a show, or maybe even at your church, someone is got to be responsible for making certain that there's some order. Now, saying all of that, let me get it all out.
Yes.
So I'm kind of on both sides here because I've been in situations. I was telling someone today where I was preaching one church, and the more involved I got, the more involved someone else got. If I raised my voice, he raised his voice, and I finally stopped just to give this person an opportunity to do whatever they wanted to do. And they stopped when I stopped, and when I started again,
they went on. Right.
And I handled it, I thought, in a good way. So there's a lot I want to say about this, but that I just want to say that as a pastor, as a worship leader, we have some responsibility to maintain some order. The ultimate guidance, of course, is that we don't quench the spirit. We're not God, and so our presence is not as important as his presence. And there are many people who are not flowing in the spirit, so they don't even know when they're quenching the spirit or stepping on a move of God. And this situation is a little bit different, and I'll tell you why. Go ahead, open it up. So you can't wait with that little smirk on your face.
I know. We can't
you about
wait.
You about to do the Keon to me. What you about to
do? In case people are wondering
what
he's
is
talking
going
about. We're talking about Pastor Keon Henderson from Houston, and he opened up his sermon with silencing a woman during his sermon who had really was getting her praise on. My thing is, doesn't the
Well, hold on.
Someone
Let me interject.
Okay.
Because the stages, he wasn't actually preaching. It was a worship moment. So the choir was engaged, everybody singing and chanting and things like that. So she wasn't disrupting his sermon. So that's what makes this situation a little bit tricky, because this is a time where you like, hey, I will bless the Lord at all times. Everybody open up your mouth at the same time. It's not being quiet and listen to the pastor's sermon.
Right.
And he was trying to move the service ahead.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But here's the other thing that kind of impacts this is, he was on Tamron Hall, and so he said some things subsequently. But this had been going on with this woman for 4 years. Well, if someone in my church was disrupted to my
I can't wait to hear this.
they wouldn't be sitting in the chancel after 4 years.
After 4 years.
They wouldn't be sitting right behind me.
And also, he said he knows the difference between disturbance and worship. But isn't there a saying where you come as you are?
No, hold up a second. I said from the very beginning. Let's keep this in context. As a pastor or the worship leader, somebody has to be responsible for making certain that there's corporate edification.
Correct.
We don't exalt individual edification at the expense of corporate.
But does it have to be perfect for Jesus?
What?
Does it have to be perfect for Jesus?
Well, I don't think it was being perfect. Yeah, we're not talking about perfection.
We're talking about the flow of the Spirit.
Correct.
And allowing in a corporate context where 2 or 3 are gathered together for all to be able to be edified and not one person necessarily preempt the move of the Spirit.
Well, I think we've all been in church services where the preacher may have been preaching or a song has been sung, and all of a sudden it may hit me before it hit anybody else, or like when people take off running. I'm running around the church. Nobody else may be following me, but in that moment, that's how God.
And who gonna tell you how to praise God?
And that was my
the
moment.
Pastor,
that's my moment. Okay.
Obviously.
Hush in the name of Jesus. Right now.
He about to take you around the church.
I don't think he was telling people how. He was suggesting when.
But in the moment, he said, now stop it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I understand, because it's a transition. And I think in every moment, and Stephanie, with you being a praise and worship leader, and sometimes it's like, okay, we got to move. They make those comments. We got to move.
That is true.
And we go try to go on to offering, and they go ahead and start saying their scripture and tell the musician, hey, stop playing. Y'all come on so we can move on. So I think we've been in those situations, but it almost goes back to kind of like when you're appearing and say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so I think that may be more.
So you had some issues with the way he said it?
Hush in the name of Jesus and snapping. I mean, that was.
So I asked you a specific question.
Answer
so
the question.
Answer is yes.
Yeah.
You had a problem.
I didn't have a problem with it.
Right.
Because I've been in churches where,
you can't be polite to demons, by the way. You can't demon, would you please stop misbehaving?
But to your point, then that's the other side of it. How is she still in the
Well, that's
choir
the
right
the main point of it is, listen. We had a lady that was disruptive at my church on the east side. And she got to the point she thought it was demon possessed. She was burning candles, putting black crosses on people's doors. And I mean, it's the only person in 30-some years of pastoral ministry that we literally had to put out of the church. Only person in my life that we voted out of the church and had to get a restraining order.
My God.
And there's no private interpretation. The Bible's very clear about that.
Right.
It's a real onus on a pastor or a worship leader who may parse, the flesh and the spirit all the time to now make a in the moment decision about what's of the spirit and what's not.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I hear what you're saying is how you handle that. Now, let me just tell you what happened in my situation. I was in Long Island preaching, and the guy was just, louder and louder, and I stopped, and I started again. He started right back up. Right. And finally, I just stopped. I said, there's a thin line between personal edification and disruption. Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. All hell broke out of the church. He started coming to the pulpit like he going to pull me out the pulpit. A fight broke out in the church between some who wanted to restrain him and others who didn't. Went on for half an hour. The pastor finally grabbed the guy, threw him out the church, told everybody else, sit down, shut up, and if you don't like it, leave. And he said, now, son, you go ahead and finish preaching. But what I didn't know is he was at odds with the church because his wife had divorced him.
He had other problems.
There were other things going on.
Yeah.
So that's another issue here that you know, if they've been addressing this for 4 years.
Yes, sir.
And she's in the chancel.
Yes.
Addressing it how, though? I mean, because my thing is,
okay,
there's one thing to cause the disruption, if you will, of her praise and worship during the actual service. There's another thing to address it and say, look, if you continue with the disruptions outside,
but he said he's done that.
He said
he's done that.
So don't have her on the praise and worship team anymore now.
I agree with that. So when I came to New Galilee, they had a deacon who was chairman of the deacon board, right? And he'd have a list of songs, and I wouldn't get up to preach when he got done with all he was doing till like 1 o'clock. I mean, the whole day was him. You know, 15, 20 songs. And after 3 weeks of that, you know, I got up one Sunday and said, we're going to move on with worship. And he says, oh, no, I'm not done. I got 4 more songs. I said, well, I tell you what, after church, get your little group together and you finish your request, because right now we get removed on in service. And then I reorganized the service so that preaching was the center of the service, not everything done. Like if you come to New Destiny, we don't take up the Lord's money till the end of the service because the main focus is the word, right? But the point is that sometimes you have to address it in public.
I agree.
Because if you don't address it in public, then you're not going to have the authority to be able to make decisions about what should and shouldn't be done.
Yeah. And we're talking about it because it was captured on
it's
film.
It's a big deal. They made all kind of funny
memes.
It's
it's hilarious. But I think that the bigger issue here is not that we need to take live stream out the church. Everybody's like, oh, you need to turn off the cameras in church. That's the problem. No, keep the cameras on and teach people order. Just like Rev just started out talking about the order. I don't think that we honor pastors. We don't honor order. We don't honor any civic places that we go. We don't honor the police officers. We are living in a generation and in a time where they don't honor order.
Okay,
and
so to that point, then who's in charge during worship?
Who's in charge during worship?
I'm asking you a question.
Is the pastor? Is the pastor or the preacher or the prophet?
So if the pastor, the prophet, the priest, or the appointed worship leader is in charge,
like the choir director,
the choir director, worship leader.
In most instances, the choir director is out of order. You know, all you gotta do is trace the ideological etymology of choir.
I ain't agreeing with that.
Trace the ideological etymology of choir direction. You go right back to Satan, who was an angel in heaven, ran the music ministry. I'm just messing with you on that.
Well, speaking of church and things being out of order, something else happened in the news recently. An armed gunman walked into a church and pointed the weapon at the pastor while he was giving his sermon before someone in the church grabbed him and got, restrained him and got a hold of the gun. This is another one that everybody is talking about. So how do we?
If we believe you, the pastor should have just let him do his thing.
That's crazy.
Well,
don't bother the brother. He's in order. You know.
That's crazy.
It brings into focus about when we talk about come as you are, do we do screenings in churches before you come in?
It's
the
almost like we need to.
Our places of worship. How do we
prevent that from happening? I mean, but that's almost in any public place that you're going to now, when people can just walk in and cause havoc. So, I mean, I think for the church, we got to move outside of just.
Well, here we are again talking about order, right?
Yeah, but order, and that's security. I mean, it's people. I think we need to do a better job, even with Keon. We need to deploy the ushers. Where are the old school ushers? The ushers,
but
if you would have had that Baptist fit in there, that usher would have came up politely, moved you, your baby crying, that usher gonna come get control, and they gonna put you in the
true,
vestibule.
And by the way, one of the things we forgot about Keon is that Jesus was not polite to foul spirits.
That's right.
He called them Beelzebubs. I mean, he had names for them. So I just think we ought to bring to resolution where we are with Keon and go around the table, and then we come back to the other because
we in the church today?
Huh?
Yeah, we talking about all church.
Well, I'm simply saying, that the biggest problem that I have is, and I take into consideration what you said, what was said or how it was said. But the bigger issue I have is what was said subsequent when he was on Tamara's show saying that this had been going on for 4 years. Why would that person be in the chancel? And then it also made me think that this was an opportunity for him to have thought about what was done and put it in some context that makes it look more favorable than it was.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, even pastors have to figure out how to spin things. You know what I mean?
So you think it was kind of like a publicity stunt?
like the pastor that cheated on his wife had to get in front of the church because the woman was there, and they said, well, what happened, Pastor? Said, you know what? The lights was off. I thought it was my wife.
So, yeah, these celebrity pastors, they going on making these national publicity stunts. Basically, you saying that he trying to cover it up a little bit.
I'm just saying that, you know, he's in the PR business.
Yeah.
You had to find how to spin things, right?
Yeah. You can spin things in
any type of way.
Which I felt like he didn't have to spin it. He the pastor of the church.
Let me give you a good example of what a pastor friend told me one day. He said that if he ever got caught in a hotel with another woman, his wife came in the door, and then under the sheet, she says, honey, this is the maid. I couldn't find my room key.
Oh, my God.
It don't make no sense. I didn't feel like he needed to puff nothing up, you know, cover anything up. Again, he's the pastor of that church. It's like somebody coming into your house. You that's your house. You govern your house. And so if that's how you want to run your house, and that's how you should run your house. All that publicity stunt stuff, I think is late.
I think we all, in any situation, have to take a moment to self-reflect and say, could I have handled that better? So
has he said that, though?
I'm not saying that he was not justified in that moment with him giving more context, and I also understand with the power of social media, always
think of the way that we grew up in the church that we grew up in. Do you think that the bishop would have been that kind?
No, but I'm saying when it happens and I have to address it, opposed to me just saying, well, I've been having problems with her for 4 years and it's her. Well, what could I have done? Maybe
But here's the thing. There's a tremendous burden as a pastor, you know, and I tell my people all the time, I'm almost 70 years of age. I don't have the patience, nor do I have the concentration of thought that I used to have. So things that distract me annoy me. Yeah. I try not to let them do that. And so from time to time, you might hear me upbraid somebody from the pulpit, you know, because, I mean, these are people been in church long enough to know, particularly when the Spirit is moving, that there ought not to be things that they do. But I will say this as a conclusion to this. I think the ultimate thing is that he has to seek and secure reconciliation and without delay. You know, if we have fault, the Bible tells us what we're to do. He didn't have an opportunity in that moment to go to her, but that's what he should have done. I would have stopped service for a moment and I'd have gone on and talked to her privately, because that's what the Bible says. If you have aught with one, right? And then if that don't happen, then you got your 2 or 3 witnesses right in the church and you do it in front of everybody.
But you would have stopped the floor of the service?
I mean, if the Spirit is moving, it doesn't need me. If the Spirit is moving, I can step out of that context for a moment and address what I need to do one-on-one.
But he addressed it, and she became silent. So that was all that he needed to do. So does he need to do after church?
I need to find out what gift he has, because I like to get some people to be silent that quick too. All right, Andre, I'm sorry.
I mean, but are you, as a pastor, are you ever worried that, you know, you have to tread this fine line of how you speak to folk, because you never know how they may take it. Maybe they'll leave the church, and maybe they'll say some things online, or maybe they'll come back and address you directly. Now we see what this guy did. We see what this guy did in this one church. Now they're saying it's a mental illness, perhaps, but he directly confronted this pastor with a gun.
Yes,
and thankfully it did not
and that's
go
not the
off.
first time.
We still don't know the motive. But we are hearing
We are
reports.
seeing this happen over and over again in multiple churches, and I think it goes back to, are we securing our churches? You know what I'm saying? The issue of, do we need to do metal detectors? I don't know. I think
some of it goes further back than that.
Okay.
Because in the things that I watch where these things happen, is generally rooted in some kind of corrupt personal interaction. A lot of times it's because the pastor's been sleeping with folks' wives, or sleeping with members in the church, or you know, the pastor is too autocratic and not allowing the congregation to have any input or have a voice at all. So, I mean, the bottom line is, we can't do things that other folk do.
That's right.
And think we have authority to operate in the spirit when we're acting like folks who are in nightclubs and bars and everything else.
Yeah.
But what about the lady, remember, who walked in Joel Osteen's church? I mean, she walked in there with this
Another
rifle.
mental illness.
Yeah, a mental illness. But again, it just kind of brings this awareness of, do we need to actually put more security on? How in the world are we going to make sure that our houses of worship
We all have
are
security.
safe?
Most of these pastors walk around, this the package. You would think they were presidents of the United States because they got little ear things. The package is moving. I mean, I don't do any of that. I have a fundamental issue with most of the social conventions that exist around pastors and churches today because it's more about them than it is Jesus. I mean, we act like we're the president of the United States. Stand up when the pastor comes in. No, stand up when Jesus comes in.
Glory.
I don't have an honor bearer. I don't have.
Oh, you don't have armor bearers?
I don't have none of that. I'll go wherever I want to go by myself.
Did you at one time have one?
No, I've always moved freely on my own. I don't need no woman wiping my sweat off my forehead. I just think it obliterates the service model of Jesus. I think it really does. And it confuses people over who's being worshiped. Him or them.
But I think I 100% agree. But I think as we're moving in the world,
I don't know if I 100%
agree with that. I'm saying it does. The focus does need to get back on Jesus and some of these entourages and some of these, because everybody ain't called, but everybody feel like they can go get a church and they want to be a bishop and all of that. That's a subject for another day. Yeah. However, with mass shootings and this mental illness and
there should be security in the church, no question.
Security, and the deacons or these armor bearers, if you go be up there protecting the pastor, you need to be armed, ready.
And did you see the guy?
Do you necessarily need to be armed?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody in the church needs some.
What about the deacons and the ushers?
My pastor
arm the ushers.
I'm with you on that.
First Baptist on 7 Mile, 17101 West 7 Mile. Dr. Howard Bruno Magna Galfantre, someone came in there one day, I wasn't there that Sunday, put a shotgun to his head, made him lay on the ground, and then robbed people of wallets, credit cards, and jewelry in the whole church, then took him, put him in the trunk of the car they were driving, and left him in an alley somewhere. Didn't kill him. After that, he never did not have armed security in that church. I mean, it's a place that people target. There are folks there. There's money there.
Yeah.
So just like our schools, and now it's our churches.
And because your guard
it's
is
been
down.
Our churches.
We're worshiping. I'm not coming. You go other places where people may be armed. They're more on guard. But in church, no, I'm here to worship. It's free. It's my kids running around. The pastor. This is a safe space. It used to be.
It used to be, and I was going to say those places like our schools, our churches, we thought were safe havens, as they should be.
But we're talking about disorder, so let's talk about that in general, because I've been in some contexts in churches that were just totally out of order. I was a part of a church here where they had issues with the pastor. My question is, and Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians that we ought not go to the bema, to the marketplace. The church ought not to be in public display of conflict and how we resolve that. I mean, and they would get up and bang on pots and pans when the pastor preached. Got to the point we had to preach with a bulletproof vest. One Sunday I was in his office and we'd lock ourselves in the office and they were police were in there where they were trying to break the door down. I mean, I think the bigger question that we need to ask is, how much Jesus do you have that you had to behave like that? I'm a firm believer. I've never, except that one lady, I've never engaged in any kind of tug of war for control in the church. It's Jesus' church, and if he wants me there, he'll keep me there, right?
Yeah.
But we so here's the big issue. The church now has resorted to worldly means to achieve spiritual ends.
And that's what I was thinking about too, is that we have to now engage in worldly actions in order
But is that worldly? Safety is not worldly.
I'm not talking about safety. I agree with you on safety.
peace.
I'm talking about when there's conflict.
Conflict.
How do we
Okay,
resolve conflict? You know,
Peace be still. That's how we resolve it.
No.
Okay, get your little peace.
Okay.
In more ways than one.
No. Now, what they're saying is the peace is this.
Right.
Exactly.
Peace still.
Hey, but Rev, since we on this, if y'all don't know, Rev is a theologian. But I do want to ask you this. Now, you know, when we talk about like the book of Revelations, we just got to teeter just for 1 second. The book of Revelations, we talk about these are the end times. These are the end days. And now we are seeing that it is becoming almost dangerous for a lot of people to gather, not just in the USA, but when we talk about, you know, other countries that are
how
gathered.
do we know this is the end time?
And that's what I'm asking
I'm going to
you.
say, I mean, there were all kinds of terrible things going on that the disciples just recounted to Jesus.
Okay.
And Jesus said, "No man knoweth the hour nor the time," right? But your redemption draweth nigh. Look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. Oh my God, John, as you know, who wrote Revelations. Thought that the end was imminent, and that's why he was on the Isle of Patmos preparing for the second coming of Jesus.
Right.
So, I mean, we've been going through that for a long time.
years,
We don't know
many
when
years.
that's going to happen. It's so funny. I was in New York one day, and I was pastoring. You know, I was a very young guy riding a Volkswagen down the West Side Highway and listening to a religious station, and the guy comes on. He says, "God has showed me and told me when the end of the world will be." That's right. God has given me personal revelation. I know when the end is going to be. And I pull over, I'm like shaking, you know. And then I got a little relief. He says, "And I'll share with you after this commercial break."
You know what that's called?
Let me finish the story though. Then he comes back and says, "That's right, God has shown me when the end of the world will be." And you want to know what he told me? Soon.
Oh, okay.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean,
so that means nobody knows.
It's one of the most speculative things, and all of the different interpretations of revelations and what they mean, wars and rumors of war and all of that. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
Now, are we headed to that premillennial phase where there's 1,000 years where the devil reigns on the earth?
Okay.
We may well be in that. And I've even ventured so far as to say that Donald Trump almost resembles an antichrist.
I've heard you say that before, and that's why I wanted you to say it again, or just speak about the end times. And they talk about what will happen in the end times.
And he wears his hair that way because he hides his horns.
So now we're talking politics. But that pastor who was on the radio, you know what they call that?
What?
A tease. Because even the pastor got to make some money. So when he said we'll be right back,
Well, you're very good
There
at
was
tease.
money to be made.
That's one of
You're
your
very good.
specialties.
a good old tease.
Being the devil's advocate, I'm just teasing, you know.
But I'm just really glad that the pastor was safe. And in that article, they did mention that the pastor said it was an act of God that the bullet was jammed and nobody was hurt in that instance. So you know.
Well, let's speak about prayer. I mean, you know, the settling of the unsettled in church to me is based on ultimate faith and belief that it is his house and that he will govern his house, right? And as a worship leader and as a pastor, I always step in the pulpit and in that church realizing that I'm not in charge. Yeah. He has assigned me for that service, right? But at any moment, if I'm really in the spirit, the Lord will let me know what to allow. And you know, I mean, I'm not going to quench the spirit. I'm going to, step out of the way. And I think, to be honest, getting back to Keon, I'm not so certain that he was in that zone at that moment. I mean, it almost comes across as if he was annoyed that his orchestration was being impacted, not the Lord's demonstration. You got to always bifurcate our orchestration, his demonstration, because he really doesn't need our orchestration for his demonstration. Yeah. Come on, somebody.
Well, perhaps
I'm preaching right here now.
Pastor should have orchestrated or demonstrated some order before the service began and addressed this years ago. instead of now.
Yeah, but you address that in church meetings and in other settings.
That's what I'm saying.
Right, but you don't necessarily address that. And one of the things you don't do, by the way, and we run out of time. Let me tell you what I've learned, if I've never learned anything else. You cannot and do not call your people out and embarrass them in front of everybody.
Oh, wow. So that's the heart of a pastor. I hear you. I hear you, Ray.
Yeah. There's always a moment to do that later, because other people will begin to wonder whether or not you have a heart of the pastor.
Well, now is the time for reconciliation. So,
and that's what I was talking about. Has he come
hush,
out to
hush,
say that?
hush, hold on, quiet, hush. Hush!
Wait,
hold on! I said be quiet.
Wait,
we're out of time.
We're out of time.
No, we're out of time. That's what it is. And by the way, you don't know about church. I don't think you go to church. We'll see you next week.
Out of time, out of order.